Welcome back out on the mushroom trail. Boy, it has been a crazy February week out here in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. We've gotten a little bit of everything, some sunshine, some rain, even a little snowfall. So it seems that the weather just can't make up its mind out here. But as usual, we're gonna jump into the forest, see what we can find in the way of mushrooms and fungi. So thanks so much for coming along. And boy, if you're liking these videos, hit that subscribe button. Give me a like. Let me know how I'm doing down in the comments below. Gives me good motivation to continue to get out here on the trail and put out this content for y'all. So thanks for coming along. Let's jump in and let's see what we see. Sure is beautiful out here. Boy, oh boy. Love walking these game trails. Oh, check this out. So here's one that we spoke about last week. This is certainly a sight that, boy, I just love to see out here. And again, like we mentioned last time, this is a little early for this one in February. A lot of times this is associated with spring, but this is what's known as the Alpine jelly cone, Guepiniopsis alpina. And this is edible raw, so you can eat them right off the stick. There's not too much that you could confuse this with. And boy, this particular fruiting, you can sure see how it gets its common name, the poor man's gumdrop. Oftentimes that's what people refer to this as, and for good reason. So you can munch on these. They make a great trailside nibble. I think I'm gonna munch on one right now and continue along this game trail, but had to just stop to admire. Boy, I feel like I could stare at these for a really long time and not really tire of it. So fun to see. And just moving down this beautiful game trail, I noticed something up on this decaying wood. So aside from more Alpine jellycone, and again, we said that's really out this year, but this one caught my eye as well. So this could easily blend in with the petals here of these old Doug fir cones. Surely the leftovers from a Douglas squirrel. But here, this is definitely a mushroom that's blending in here. So kind of tough to notice, but you can see that really cool texture on this one. This is what's commonly referred to as the umber brown puffball. So I'm sure several of you are very familiar with puffballs. You know that inside of this, it's full of spores, just kind of waiting to enter into the world. So oftentimes you'll see these and they may have an opened hole on the top where the spores have been ejected. These are the ones that I'm sure many of you as kids would maybe stomp on some variation of these puffball mushrooms. Probably not this exact one, but cool one to see, and certainly a beauty in its own right. So blends in, but you slow down, look carefully, you notice that mushrooms are out here. They're still popping out. Not only is this an edible mushroom, but it's also a medicinal mushroom. So it's known to have antibacterial properties as well as very likely antimicrobial properties. Interestingly enough, this is used to treat asthma in some preparations. It can also be used as sort of like a baby powder type antibacterial concoction. So kind of interesting. Now, it's good to know if you're handling this one liberally, you really do not want to breathe in those spores. So, you know, we talked about how it'll eject this cloud of spores. And, you know, if you inhale too many of those at too great of a volume, it can actually cause its own kind of unique respiratory disease called Lycoperdon. So not one to, you know, slough off or take lightly. Not a huge threat either, in the sense that, you know, with a little bit of just kind of mindfulness, that's pretty darn easy to avoid, but good to know. One other random fact about this one that has really stuck in my head, I remember reading that the ethnic Mam people of southwestern Mexico, so they have a long-standing belief, a cultural belief or tradition, that they use this to ward off the evil eye. So if you haven't heard of or you haven't researched the evil eye, this is a tradition, or actually not so much a tradition, but a belief that's been really wide held across the world, across cultures, that certain people have the ability to kind of bring harm to other beings or other people just through simply like a harsh gaze, or, you know, really intently staring or looking at someone with malicious intent. So that's also was a belief in throughout Mexico, and you know, this particular tradition would use this as a way to protect against that. So really curious, very interesting mushroom that we've got here. Really cool to see it out here this time of year. And boy, I love zooming in and getting a close look at the texture of this one. It's just such a beauty, and so easy to miss out here too. So really have to keep your eyes peeled. This is a saprophytic mushroom, so grows on dead and decaying wood. I've also read things that it's, you know, thought to have somewhat of a mycorrhizal association with certain trees. So that's an interesting thing. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head whether or not that's been confirmed or denied one way or the other, but super interesting mushroom, part of a much larger family that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But this is the umber brown puffball, Lycoperdon umbrinum. Keep your eyes peeled. Just coming up off of this game trail, aside from, again, more of the Alpine jellycone, I see one that I know several of you will recognize again from last week. So this is more of what I believe is Plectania. And check out the size of this one. This is my finger for scale. I mean, this is a really good sized example of this, maybe the biggest that I've seen yet this year. So very cool, and really fun to see out here. So keep your eyes peeled. Not super obvious at first sight, right? It really blends in, but boy, it seems to really be out there this year. So let me know if you're seeing this too. Just running down one of my favorite little trails, and I was just kind of poking around. This is like, you know, one of my favorite spots to just look and see what I see. And I noticed something that kind of surprised me. So I'm seeing or noticing a lot of holes in the ground, like little diggings, similar to what I discovered in last week's video, which made me think of truffles. And check this out. So right on the side of the trail, I noticed this. So unearthed and dug up here, I believe that this may actually be a truffle. So I actually have not explored this yet. It was just laying right here. I'm gonna actually kind of take a look so you can see this isn't something that I dug up. You know, this was likely dug up by a squirrel or other creature, but you can see how it's kind of baked into these roots, this little root ball. I'm gonna kind of go ahead and unpack that. And look at what we have here. Just wild. So I'm actually out on a run, woefully unprepared to kind of cut into this and see what it looks like on the inside. So I'm gonna actually grab this, take it home, and investigate further. But we're right at the base of both some dug firs and some hemlocks, kind of classic Pacific Northwest forest. And I believe that what we've stumbled across here is a truffle of some sort. So I got interesting suggestion from someone in the comments last week about the deer truffles, and to look for small little fruiting bodies, like kind of black tongue like fruiting bodies. So I've been keeping my eye out for those. Was not expecting to just see a full fruiting body though, just kind of laying out here and already dug up for me by some other little critter or creature. So super shocked to see this, excited to get this home and work to ID it. So I'll update you on that in the time to come here, and we'll see what we found. So very exciting, cool stuff. Keep your eyes peeled and really keep an eye out for those little diggings, because you never know what you're going to discover outside of those. Fun stuff. Here's one of the initial diggings that really kind of caught my eye a second ago. Pretty significant. I mean, that's a big effort that went into that. And then over here, I'm seeing similar activity. So very cool, very interesting. Actually, let's take a quick peek at this. Thought it might be a truffle, but I think this is actually a stone. Whereas the one that I think is a truffle, I initially thought was a stone. So funny stuff, funny how it goes. Was just moving down the trail here and noticed a really pretty little gilled mushroom down here. Really beautiful. Let me zoom in here on it. So you notice this one just growing right on the side of the trail, pretty little gilled mushroom. This is what's oftentimes referred to as the Scurfy Twiglet, Tubaria furfuracea. And what's interesting about this one is it kind of fruits oftentimes in disturbed areas, and I tend to see this popping up at several different times a year. If we take a little glimpse underneath, you'll notice kind of a brownish gill surface. I believe that this has rusty brown spores. And just take a look at the stipe of this. Kind of has a unique appearance, as well as the cap. And this can kind of change its look considerably with age. So it goes through several different forms. Back behind this, you can see what it looks like in its youngest stage. So there's just a little bit of a pin coming up there. So this isn't one that I necessarily know a ton about in terms of, you know, edible or medicinal qualities. It's not edible to my knowledge, and I'm not aware of a lot of medicinal capabilities here, but it's certainly a beautiful mushroom that I always love stopping to admire. And I'll oftentimes see this in those colder months. So, you know, at this time of year when there's not always a ton to look at, this one tends to catch my eye. So keep your eyes peeled, see if you see this one out there. And if so, give it a second, stop, admire, and let me know what you think. And one thing that I'll add just up from this Scurfy Twiglet is a tree that I just wanted to take a quick second to point out. So oftentimes we're really focused on Doug firs and western hemlocks out here because they're oftentimes associated with some of the prime choice edible mushrooms. But this is also a really interesting tree that I don't often see out here in Western Washington. So, you know, I love anytime that I see something that, you know, I don't encounter that often. I like making that mental note. So this, of course, I'm sure several of you recognize this. So this is a birch tree. And I'm also sure that some of you realize or recognize that this is the tree that's oftentimes associated with chaga. So again, I don't see this a ton out here. So I like that idea of making that mental note and just kind of recognizing the simple fact that it is out here. And it just reminds me to keep my eyes peeled for some of those not as common mushroom species that I don't see as often out here. So that goes into my mental map and something that I'll just kind of continue to remember and also keep my eyes peeled for popping up in other places. So just figured I'd mention that real quick. Interesting to see. Cool bark. Boy, so I was just coming down the trail here and was so thrilled by something that caught my eye just up here. Take a look at this. So what you're looking at here is the only ice on the planet that is known to be created by a fungus. This is what's commonly referred to as hair ice, Exidiopsis effusa. And this is just such a fascinating little thing that's somewhat rare because, you know, the conditions have to be just perfect out here for this to kind of breathe or come into existence. So we're looking for a condition where the ground has not frozen, but we've reached temperatures that are slightly below freezing. And that's exactly what's happened last night and this morning. So the conditions were just perfect for this. This is growing from a red alder stick or twig. You know, there are certain hardwoods that this fungus is known to inhabit. So, you know, here it's typically red alder in the Pacific Northwest. if you're out east, you might see this on other trees like beech or oak. So again, those conditions have to be just perfect, but check this out. I mean, just incredible. So these little strands are 10 times thinner than human hair. And, you know, it's still not fully understood, but it's believed that this fungus has some type of antifreeze component that as there's this capillary action that's drawing moisture out of this twig, it's preventing it from crystallizing. So, you know, the conditions have to be just right. They have to be essentially frost conditions, right? And boy, just a beauty to look at. And this is super fleeting. I mean, as soon as this gets hit by, you know, a few rays of sunshine or a breath of warm air, this will just kind of fade and melt away to nothing. Now, in analyzing this, researchers have looked oftentimes at the meltwater from this hair ice to try to analyze what, you know, chemical components might be responsible for this very unique kind of hair-like structure that we're seeing. And what they found is that a lot of times the meltwater will contain these tannins or lignins from the actual wood that it's growing from. And again, you know, you're gonna see this from hardwoods, and specifically too, boy, there's a narrow little window or range where this occurs. So I believe that it's from 45 to 55 degrees north latitude. So not a huge distribution here. You know, if you're outside of that, you're kind of unlikely to encounter this. But something that I rarely see because of the fact that those conditions have to be just right. So really a gift to be out here on the trail this morning and to bump into this. Let's go ahead and take a look at what happens when I grab this. So take a look. Look at how delicate this is. Just the slightest touch and it's gonna break up into these little hairs. And you can see though, even as I crush that, it still maintains that form. Super delicate little thing. So cool. So this is the hair ice, Exidiopsis, effusa, and really such a cool sight out here. So super, super thrilled. Keep your eye out if you're here in the Pacific Northwest. Be examining those alder sticks. You'll see this. I mean, it'll stand out, especially if there's no snow in the area. You know, it's likely to catch your eye. So very rare thing, very cool to see. And boy, crazy to think that this is caused by a fungus. So cool. And was just running down the trail and caught another view of yet another great example of hair ice. So really out this morning, and boy, what a beautiful sight. And if we look over here, so again, this is red alder. Here's an extension of that, right? A little bit of our friend there, the turkey tail, growing off that alder. Nice, fresh, young fruiting body. And on the back side, more hair ice. So, and again, that'll bend and curve towards heat. So it's interesting, as this comes out, it'll kind of get this wavy pattern, which might be difficult to see, but you can kind of get a sense of it there. So it'll curl and move. Those hairs are not just necessarily straight projections. They'll curl and they'll move towards heat. So definitely get some interesting patterns out of that. Super cool to see. So again, if those conditions are just right, boy, keep your eyes out, because so fun to admire. Boy, and as I was examining this hair ice, something on the back side of this log. So aside from turkey tail, this also caught my eye. So I'm gonna take a look at this. This is not something I was expecting to see here. So this log has an abundance of things going on. If I take this and I turn this over and see what that gill structure looks like, really wild to see this. So this is what's known as the peeling oysterling, growing here from this red alder. Really fun to see, and amazing how a single alder log can host so many different species. Who knows what else is inhabiting this log? Probably other things that we're not seeing right at this very moment as well. So see if I can get that into focus. Boy, just beautiful. It's a little bit like almost frozen right now, but really fun to look at. Take a look. Here's the top side of that. Growing right off the side here. So right along with hair ice and turkey tail. So boy, February, don't expect to see much, but there's always stuff going on out here. Just incredible. And just up the trail here, I was running down and something caught my eye over here. Let's pull over and take a quick peek. So check this out. Beautiful little fruiting body. Boy, taking a close look, not 100% sure on this one. Very interesting. This is growing out of a red alder log here. Wow, sure is pretty to look at though, especially in this morning light. And not only do we have this kind of mysterious little body here, but take a look at this. Just up here in a little crack of this log. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. Look at this. Just incredible. Now these are super tiny little fruiting bodies. This is what's known as the stalked hairy fairy cup. What a name, right? Wow, just look at those. So if I were able to zoom in close enough, what you would see underneath would be these fine little hairs underneath those cups. Boy, it's just amazing to see what all is going on in these little micro habitats. I mean, this is like sort of like a little recessed cave here created by this old alder log. Boy, just a joy to look at. And look, back there in the deep recesses, we see our mystery fruiting body. Also so pretty. Wow, look at that. So sometimes I'll see these and they'll have beads of guetation on them, which is really quite a sight because they're so small to begin with, and then you see these little micro beads or droplets. Just so cool. And this is, you know, really throughout this log where we see just really incredible fruiting of this one. Good reminder to just kind of stop and really look closely. I mean, this is on such a micro scale. It's kind of incredible what's going on at these small levels every day out here. Just got to take the time to stop, slow down, and look closely, just to give you a sense of scale. If I zoom out, I mean, this is not that big of a log, so this is a tiny little crack that all this is happening in. You can see just a small little flack. You really have to zoom in to get the bigger picture. And you can see a little bead of vegetation on that one there. Sometimes you'll see them just covered in it if the weather conditions are perfect. So it's a little chilly out here this morning, so I think everything is kind of locked up tight, but really a joy to see. So much fun. Oh man, when I see something like this, it really changes your perspective. I mean, this stuff is all super tiny. Suddenly I'm in a different world here, zooming in on this micro scale and just seeing what all's going on back in this dark recesses of this little miniature cave here. So cool to see. Just coming up the trail here. Boy, is this a beautiful forest. Got a ton of just huge Doug firs in this stand. And one thing that I notice up here to the left, see if you can spot it. So I'm seeing a Dyer's Polypore, Phaeolus schweinitzii. We featured this a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this being, you know, one of the favorites amongst those who dye natural fabrics, you know, silks and wools and all that good stuff. This is a very sought after mushroom for that. So this is quite old. This is definitely, you know, a mushroom that has been out here a while. Oftentimes we'll see this fruiting at the base of big old Doug firs, and it's a sure sign that they're on their way out. So we can see on this tree, it's not just growing from the base, it's actually growing from the trunk near the base. And if we look up this tree, notice the deep furrows of this Doug fir. This is certainly a very old tree, and we can see that it's already kind of past. It's now a snag, you know, that's in the process of decay. I'm sure it's just a matter of time before this tree comes down. So, you know, I referenced a couple weeks ago the fact that a lot of times when I see this at the base of a still live tree, especially one of these great big Doug firs, you know, it's always something that kind of is fun to see, but also a little bit disturbing, because I know that that tree is then coming down. So anyhow, this one, obviously it's been out here quite some time, but I'll just give you a good close-up so that you can see. Cool to be able to recognize this, even if it's not necessarily a fresh fruiting body. Still cool to be able to identify it. And I'm sure if we poked around the base of this tree, there's a pretty good chance we'll find some old fruiting bodies down on the ground as well. So just figured I'd point that out. Cool to see. So Dyer's Polypore, Phaeolus schweinitzii. Keep your eyes peeled. And just up here on the side of the trail, we've got a lone fruiting of a single sticky oysterling, Scytinotus longinquus. This is one that we featured last week, so oftentimes mistaken for an oyster mushroom. And boy, you can see why. This is a particularly beautiful one. So I usually see these in large troops on debarked alder, but this is a lone one coming out of bark. And boy, it's a stunner. So again, there's a little bit of controversy over whether this is edible or inedible, so it's not super well documented, but a lot of reports of this one being consumed by the likes of David Aurora, I believe Daniel Winkler, and others. So kind of an interesting one to look for. Not one that I've tried, but boy, I do love seeing it out here. And so again, it's going to have a sticky cap. You can notice or see slight striations. Sometimes it's like kidney shaped, you know, that's the general shape of this. And boy, you can see all the little forest litter sticking to this cap. It's kind of got a little bit of a rosy appearance. So sometimes you'll hear this referred to as the rosy oysterling. But again, really beautiful one to see, and especially this time of year, you know, it's interesting to see what all is popping out. So love seeing this. Keep your eyes peeled, and if you're here in the Pacific Northwest, it's a good chance that you'll encounter this one right about now. So keep your eyes open, and let me know if you see this one out there. And coming down the trail here, really interesting thing that I noticed, boy, about a month and a half or 2 months ago, this red alder fell across the trail, and at the time I was elated because there was quite a bit of very fresh fruiting turkey tail. So I harvested some of it at that time. You can see that this stuff is the older stuff that's still on here. So it's no longer oriented horizontally to the ground. You can see that that's the old fruiting body. If we look at the neighboring log that had to be sawed up to free up the trail, we see a similar thing. So these are some old fruiting bodies that are oriented now not horizontally to the ground. But then we see these fresh fruiting bodies back here that are incredibly fresh, especially considering the simple fact that we're in February. These are coming out nice, young, fresh fruiting bodies. Those are the kinds that I love to throw in the pot for my teas and decoctions. So always cool to see. Just figured I'd point this out really quickly. And yeah, good luck hunting this one down. It's a great one. Does the body good, so cool to see. Just coming up the trail, looking at this downed Doug fir snag. We see one that we highlighted last week. Again, this is a common turkey tail look-alike. It's known as the violet-toothed polypore. The version that I see most often out here is one that fruits on coniferous wood, but there's one that's more common back east that typically fruits on deciduous hardwood. So this one, both of those are in the Trichaptum species. Both of them go by the same common name. And you can see that little violet at the margin, just a slight violet hue. So again, at different stages of growth, you're gonna see different degrees of that violet color. And if we flip this over, we see kind of a little bit more of that violet color at those cap edges and a little bit of a rough toothed surface. So very different from the small fine pores that you're gonna see on turkey tail. So again, good one to be able to differentiate from the one that a lot of us are after, the turkey tail. So I was just running up the trail this way and something over here caught my eye. So super interesting little mushroom fruiting here. I'm gonna zoom in on this. So this is a little growth form. It's coming out of coniferous wood. So we've got, you know, a Doug fir log here off to the side of the trail. And as I zoom in on this, it looks super, super interesting. So you can see that really unique texture underneath this. Now this one, I'm not 100% sure on this, but what I believe that we're looking at is something that's referred to as serried pore crust. So this is a really interesting one that grows from coniferous wood. I'll have to, once I get back to the home front, I'll have to pull out some field guides and really confirm that that's what we're looking at. There's another contender that's in my mind, but I believe that other one prefers hardwoods and doesn't show up on coniferous wood. So, and that one that I'm thinking about is the white-toothed polypore, but I think that this is different. I think this is serried pore crust. So let me know if you're watching this and you've got experience with this one, or you want to kind of weigh in on this or bounce some ideas around. Let me know. This isn't one that I typically see identified all that often, and it kind of blends in with a lot of the other stuff that's out here. So, but very, very cool, and I love getting a close glimpse underneath the surface of this one and just seeing all those really unique features. So kind of interesting. Doesn't look like much from the top, but just as is the case with a lot of things out here in nature, you slow down, you take a closer look, and it's pretty magnificent. So keep an eye out for this one. And like I said, if you've got a strong opinion, or really any opinion, not even a strong opinion, just a conversational piece, let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to get your take on this. So cool to see. So I'm back on the home front here, and I'm eager to cut into this thing and see what it looks like on the inside. So I referenced out there on the trail that, you know, I got a comment in last week's video from Masamune Sword. So what he wrote me is, he said, from the remnants of the truffle you found, it looks pretty likely that it's some flavor of Elaphomyces there. He said, squirrels go wild for those and they can crumble the way your truffle crumbs look. keep an eye out for an area for small black earth tongue-like fruitings, as Elaphomyces can host a parasitic fungus. So what he referenced was in the Tubaria genus. So this is commonly referred to as the golden thread fungus. Now I've been keeping an eye out for this. That was such awesome information. I really appreciate the comment. I've been keeping an eye out for that golden thread fungus. Haven't seen it yet, but as you saw in the video, I was really fortunate to come across this. So let's go ahead, let's take a quick second and let's cut into this and see what we've got here. Ooh, so here's the inner workings of this truffle. Very interesting to see what we've got here. So it kind of squished down just a little bit, but let me zoom in here and take a look. So this is very cool. This is excellent to get a look inside. This is gonna help me ID this. So now that I've got a good idea of what this looks like on the inside, I'm gonna pull out those field guides again. You know, this is one of those areas that I know a little bit about, but I don't know as much about the world of truffles as I'd like to. So plenty of learning on my end to take place here. So I'm excited to dig into those field guides and see what I can figure out. So let me take a quick look at those and then I'll get back to y'all and let you know what I think based on what I'm seeing inside here. Boy, even after pouring through these field guides, I'm still not 100% sure of exactly which truffle species I'm looking at here. I've had it, you know, just stashed in the fridge for a couple days and have been dying to cut this thing open and just see what's inside. So here we are. I thought the answer may be clear once we cut inside, but I still am not sure. So if you have some level of expertise or some knowledge on this, I'd love if you would let me know in the comments what you think we may be looking at here. Really appreciate your input as we continue to learn more about the wonderful world of truffles in the Pacific Northwest. Well, that concludes another great day out here on the mushroom trail. Thank you all so much for coming along. And until next time, happy trails.